You're listening to Synergy to Synastry, the podcast where two corporate girlies called to follow their intuition take you on a journey of self-exploration through metaphysical modalities.
I'm Christine, intuitive coach and clairvoyant.
And I'm Renee, psychic intuitive and astrologer.
We're excited that you're here and honored to be your spiritual guides. If you enjoy this podcast, make sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen. It helps listeners find our show, plus it automatically enters you into our raffles to win a free psychic reading.
Now, let's get into the episode.
Here in New York, I don't know if you've heard, but we are expected to have one full week of rain. It's already been raining for at least 24 hours. And I woke up today and I swear my head is going to explode from the barometric pressure.
I am not in New York, but I also woke up today, and my sister too. Like both of us woke up and we had our windows closed. So I was thinking it was pollen, but it doesn't make sense. Windows closed. We both were like thrown off congestion wise. So I don't know if we're feeling the same thing too, but it is also supposed to rain here all week.
As we know, this is secretly a food podcast. So as I know you've been eating sriracha to heal yourself. In an effort to heal myself, I made myself a huge lunch of like polenta, asparagus, everything that like could feed me right now to like give me the vitamins to get through it. And then after we record this podcast, I'm going to go take a nap for like 5 hours. But the reason I say this is because I realize for so long I had been living in so much masculine energy that if I had this experience today, maybe 5 years ago, I would have pushed through until my body literally broke down and I got sick.
I am totally with you on a slow transition to get more into the divine feminine, and how great that we are talking about this today because we have a special guest who discusses this a lot on her podcast. Today we have on Vanessa Grace, who helps women enliven their innate divine feminine. She is a Radiance Coach who joins psychology, spirituality, and life aspirations to help women create the lives that they want for themselves. Vanessa loves talking about epigenetics, chakras, and why your menstrual cycle is the secret to everything. Her expertise as a former therapist, kind heart, and a dash of light humor helps her clients bloom into the lives they are seeking. Welcome, Vanessa.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here and talk about really all the things, just all the things.
Vanessa has so many great things that we have to talk to her about. And also she's into books. So if after this interview, even if you felt like you got nothing out of it, please go check her out on social medias and listen to all her book stuff because I am obsessed.
Books, 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 books.
So Vanessa, tell us about your job. How did you get from counseling into Radiance coaching and podcasting?
I was a therapist for a decade in private practice, and I had started to create an evergreen program that kind of morphed into coaching, but that was focused on codependency because I'd figured out I was codependent, which was actually how I got into the coaching world. And that was the initial transition into Soul Amplified. So the beginning of the podcast is actually all about psychology and codependency and like me having baby steps, being able to talk about spirituality. I was bigger in my spiritual journey in the beginning than the podcast sounded like, but it was like me learning to have my voice to share it publicly. You know how that is when you're thinking, oh my God, I can't share this with other people, let alone strangers in the world. That slowly grew my voice through having the podcast and realizing that the world did not burn down around me. As often happens with me and my personal growth, especially now that I have Soul Amplified as a business, my personal growth ends up affecting what I'm doing in my business. And I was really on this search to understand why my own period was missing and what was going on with it. Because for a long time, it was really messed up. It was either absent or it was really heavy. I didn't know what was going on. And a friend had like helped me with this book And I was like, oh, wow, I didn't know these things about my period. But then I was in a more spiritual space. And then people started talking about things like vaginal steaming and that periods could be spiritual. And I was like, say what now? Divine feminine and period stuff and spirituality kind of all started intersecting. And that's when really I became less and less interested in focusing on codependency at work. And all I wanted to do was talk about why the entire menstrual cycle was so important, because I was realizing how pivotal it was for me. And like, this was really a recipe for women to understand themselves in a way that had been beaten so much out of the history of humanity that women didn't know it existed for hundreds or thousands of years. And so that's how I ended up pivoting and being like, I'm just going to call myself a Radiance Coach now. And at first I thought, how can I call myself a Radiance Coach? What in the world do I even have to say about it? After I had written on a front and a back of a piece of paper, 8.5 by 11, I was like, well, okay, apparently I have something to say, and that's more than enough to convince myself that I can call myself this. These aren't beginning concepts that I'm writing about on this piece of paper. So apparently I do have something to say. So apparently I can call myself a Radiance Coach. I still believe that old adage that like the thing you're supposed to teach people is the thing you're working on, which is definitely true for me. I'm still working on my divine feminine and understanding it, and accidentally working too hard in my masculine and falling into that old pattern, which I am totally a part of. Like I was, oh, good girl, A+ student, blah, blah, all that stuff. Hello, I have a master's degree and I got good grades the whole fucking time.
You said so many really good things there, so I want to try to grab them before we move on to more of what the Radiance coaching involves. One of the first things that you mentioned, your decision in doing this podcast, and one piece of it being empowering yourself and sharing your voice and telling your story. And I know for Christine and I, that was a really big motivator for us. Okay, we keep getting these messages about us doing a podcast together. Let's just do 12 episodes. And how long was our first season? We kept coming up with new ideas and bonus episodes, and we kept adding more. And we were like halfway through and we had ideas for season 2. Once we latched on, the energy was there, the momentum was there to support us. And by the end of our season 1 run, I then launched my business because I felt so much more confident. I was like, I know what I'm talking about. I'm doing this work. I have things I can teach. And it took me going through that process with Christine to get myself finally to that point.
I feel like my brain is exploding because, like you said, I have PCOS. For years, I was just prescribed birth control and metformin and sent on my way and, come back when you want to have kids. I got to a point where I started this spiritual journey and I was like, I want to come off birth control. I want to see what life is like without it. And sure enough, I'm still working to regulate my menstrual cycle, but I found my channeling was significantly better or more clear once I got off of birth control. And I'm not saying anything bad about birth control. Just, I wish I would have understood my cycle more before I chose to go on it instead of just being prescribed it and not understanding how my body works. There's a book out there and I think it's called like The Sixth Vital Sign. I really think it's fascinating for women. Like we have all of our 5 senses and then we also have our cycle. It's a physical thing, but it is also a spiritual thing. I really think it connects to our intuition. So I really want to know what Radiance Coaching is.
Okay, part of the divine feminine is having an open heart chakra. When your heart chakra is open, that doesn't mean you don't have boundaries. You know how to hold them. And that is how your heart is protected. You can speak your voice and keep people at bay who are an issue. But when your heart chakra is open, that is when a woman or a divine feminine person feels radiant. You are experiencing a heightened level of joy. Some would say bliss. You feel attractive that day. You don't look any different. It's because you're feeling yourself. You're feeling radiant. It's when you're magnetic and people are drawn to you. It's because you're being radiant in that moment, in that day. When you are maybe manifesting things easier, radiance is involved. For the people in the back who are conditioned into our culture of hard work and never rest, The divine feminine manifests through joy and pleasure, i.e., your heart is opening, experiencing happy things. When I have weekends where I go away and do whatever the fuck I want and don't have problems and just float around on a fucking cloud, people are like messaging me out of nowhere. Oh, I want to do this thing with you. Like, people are DMing me on Instagram, and I'm like, where did this come from? Why wasn't this last week? Well, it's because last week I was working my ass off at work. So when you're in flowy flow is when you're going to manifest if you're a person whose core essence is divine feminine. And core essence is where your soul rests. If your core essence is masculine, you need masculine energy is where you kind of go and rest at the end of your day. Our society needs to shift away from how it's structured right now. That might take a hot minute, but I'm shifting away from that because I work from home and try and live my life the way I want.
Do you think that people who are women or identify as women need feminine energy and people who are men who identify as men need masculine energy? Or do you think it doesn't really matter what your biological sex is or how you identify? It's just a matter of what feels right to you. How would you define that?
So I think it matters what feels right to you, but it's also, you can get tricked into believing that you're one, not the other, because society is so focused on masculine energy. You can end up believing that your core essence is masculine energy because you can get pleasure from the success that masculine energy brings you. Imagine 4 quadrants in your head. Draw the vertical line and the horizontal line, and now there's 4. The top half is divine. The bottom half, both quadrants, is wounded. Okay, and then the left side is masculine. The top is divine masculine. The bottom is wounded masculine. Top quadrant on the right side is divine feminine. Bottom right side is wounded feminine. So you could be a person who rests in your divine feminine, and that's your core essence. But you also have experienced things in life that make you wounded feminine, and you cover that up with wounded masculine things. You can have protectors and behaviors that are wounded and masculine or feminine. They can layer on top of each other, and so you think that you might be masculine or you think that you might be feminine when you're the other, but there can be multiple layers of them on top of each other. And you can switch between masculine and feminine, the divine version or the wounded version, within a few moments and still be a person who rests in divine masculine or in divine feminine. And you have to be aware of if you are having wounded traits. Like a wounded trait of the feminine is codependency. A wounded trait of the masculine is being domineering. How much of our culture is wounded male domineering? But they think that they're right. A wounded trait of the feminine, getting love through drama. How many TV shows portray a female getting love through drama? And how many girls can you think of who do that? The psychology world has a bunch of other words for it, but can boil down into, oh, that's a wounded thing. They're missing pieces of divine masculine, divine feminine that they didn't get. They're not gendered. Carl Jung calls them animus and anima, so there are other terminologies for them. This is just the one that's dominant right now, and it's the one that I learned, so it's the one that I tend to say. If you want to use the yin-yang terminology for it, it's the same stuff from a different culture. You can use those terms, and then you won't get caught up in genitalia and gender if that is a trigger for you, which I totally respect, because it is for a lot of people.
When Christine was referencing back in our string theory episode talking about the movie Soul, in that creative energy, when you're in the psychic space, things are flowing. It's helping with manifestation. I was so glad that you mentioned that. So we had a manifestation episode earlier in the season, episode 3, with the yin and yang energy, our feng shui episode. So there's lots of through lines, which I love that just in this conversation, we have so many points coming together. So what I want to know, based on what you were explaining with your handy chart, is how does somebody know what their core energy is, whether it is feminine or masculine? Is that part of what you do in your coaching? Help them figure that out?
I tend to focus a lot on helping someone understand their energy practices and their spiritual development. And I tend to focus a lot on moving in their flow of their divine feminine energy. I know less about masculine energy. I could probably do a 1-hour presentation on it and then be maxed out, in all honesty, because I'm not as passionate about it.
You were saying before, as a collective, we are trying to move away from it. As we've discussed previously on your podcast, I have been learning tarot. And so if you have Queen of Cups, that's like divine feminine. And then when you have the King, it's that divine masculine. And that's all about the mastery. Just because we have the masculine doesn't mean that there is no intuition. There is still something divine, worthy, and valuable about it. It's just about when we're in excess. We want them to be balanced, or we want to lean more into one or another, depending on like what we're doing.
I'm going to be real honest here. I have wounding with the masculine. I think I have subconscious distrust of masculine. I think that it's part of my soul contract to lean in this way. Other people are out there teaching divine masculine, and they are supposed to exist in the world. I think that actually the masculine that is dominating the world right now as patriarchy is actually the wounded masculine. When people think about a male-dominated world and cringe, they're cringing against the wounded masculine, which they should. That person is focused on domination and control, or that idea is. Thinking about the concepts of divine masculine, leadership, and I can be present for you and grounding, and I can lead you. To ask someone who has experienced the wounded masculine to trust a divine masculine to lead them is really hard, because like surrendering into the wounded masculine means you're going to be hurt.
We're in a time period where there's astrology is kind of backing this up as well, like supporting women, supporting minority groups, shifting of power, who has the power, healing societally. Like I can't tell you how many podcasts and books, articles I've read talking about male loneliness epidemic and like all of these issues with masculinity. We shouldn't call it toxic, because then it makes men or masculine people think that we think all men are bad. And it's like, so all of that discourse is happening at the same time because it's the equal and opposite reaction of these movements. So do you think we're on the frontier of building out, moving society, the global culture towards the divine feminine, and then it will be followed by a wave of people moving more into the divine masculine? It's very clearly behind people understanding the divine masculine and that taking over, because there's all the wounded masculine resistance to it. So do you think that we'll need to integrate more of the divine feminine throughout society before the collective will be ready to move into more divine masculine to pair with it?
So I'm going to reference something that one of my teachers said and extrapolate it on a global scale. In a relationship where there's personal growth happening or soul growth happening, the feminine will always lead the soul growth because she's more connected to the divine than the masculine is, and will see it first and feel it first. And so she will lead the soul growth. Sometimes drag the masculine with her or leave him behind. And if we were to extrapolate that to the global scale, that's kind of what we're seeing.
I feel like that tracks.
Yeah.
Like everything you said just really hit me so hard.
and I'm not sure that I have a personal opinion about what you're saying. Will the masculine have to become divine afterwards? I'm like, yeah, that makes sense to me. But I also see a lot of information about kind of there's a split. A bunch of people will continue to live in 3D, and then whoever wants to move into divine masculine will move into 5D. I think of 3D as being like less connected to spirituality. Maybe you have a religion that you believe in, but you're not necessarily having conversations with anybody on the other side or have spiritual gifts. Whereas if you're in 5D, you're having more light body experiences. you're having spiritual gifted experiences, embodying more love in your body. There's more love-based decisions where even if you are based in a religion in 3D, you aren't holding as much love in your body, so you can still make fear-based decisions. Even if you're part of like a belief system, but then your human, like lizard brain, nervous system responses can still be, but what if blah, blah, blah happens and I have trauma in my body, and that from my lived experience and from my epigenetics and from the ancestry of humanity. And I haven't cleared that because I don't know how to do that. And I don't like therapy because my family would make fun of me, whatever, insert that bullshit here.
It makes sense. And I don't know if this analogy is going to completely relate to what you just said, but I heard somewhere, and it's stuck with me for a long time, that religion is for those who fear hell and spirituality is for those who have experienced hell and aren't afraid of it.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Right?
I mean, I don't agree with that because I am from Christianity and am still Christian, but was never raised with hell. I was never raised with a version of Christianity that promoted hell as a root of fear. I was raised with a version of Christianity that promoted Jesus as a version of love. We did study the Old Testament, but was very much rooted in be an example of Jesus. And so, and it's not that my church was always like that through their entire history, but most of my childhood and all of my adulthood, it has been very focused on doing good in the world and love others. I know that my church is not all churches. There are churches that are very hell-based, but they are the ones that get the most airtime, and the ones that are love-based, no one gives a shit about on the news.
In talking about religion, Christian nationalism. So you could say, well, I'm a Christian, blah, blah, blah. I'm making all these decisions based on my religion and what, I believe God has said, blah, blah, blah. But then you are getting sucked into an algorithm. You're being told that this prophecy, this thing is going to happen, yada, yada, by these people that are making money off of manipulating your belief system rather than it really being based in the fundamentals of your faith. If you do believe on one hand, Jesus and God and all of that is about love, helping your neighbor and all this other stuff, then why are we burning each other's lawn signs down? There's a disconnect. I think this whole conversation about being in more of that wounded energy, whichever way we are swinging this. Christine had asked her initial question about, based on gender, people identifying with divine feminine or masculine, and the fact that, of course, obviously we have non-binary people too, or agender people. This idea of it being a spectrum, there could have been people that are listening to this conversation and they checked out right there because they are walking around saying, no, well, there's only two genders. It's so strongly held, even though we have history across the globe to spirit where they are connected, essentially a spiritual guide. They are the oracle. They are intuitive. These individuals were revered. And now we're in this situation where we have indoctrinated into this binary that is disconnecting us from each other and from the duality and spectrum that lives within us.
What I do want to do is pivot this conversation a little bit. Knowing that you focus more on the divine feminine, I'm wondering, who is your client? What is a session like? And most importantly, how do they grow during their sessions with you?
The types of clients that tend to come to me that I think my soul is here to work with is how I'm going to phrase it. They have been coming to me since I was a therapist. The types of things that I work with them on just shift with my title. They're people who are ending the trauma in their family line, ending the epigenetic issues, ancestral trauma, changing the patterns, going to therapy. They're reading the books on how to end that stuff, setting more boundaries in their family. The families that are really, really connected almost to an unhealthy level, where if you change, you're like violating some family lore, and they're changing. And so it's almost like, hey, you're different now. How dare you change? How dare you leave us? Even though they haven't really left, they're just choosing to live more healthy, but it's seen as abandonment. That kind of person who's working on themselves, A lot of people are developing their spiritual skills right now because the energy is rising on Earth alongside feminine energy rising, which those two things are highly connected. I actually help a lot of people develop their spiritual skills and figure out what their clairs are and how to work with their spirit guides. I'm really interested in working with women or feminine people who are just really ravenous about personal growth and spirituality. It's kind of my hobby for myself. I don't know what to talk to people about in my personal life if you're not interested in that. If you're not interested in personal growth, I don't even know what to talk to you about as a friend. I'll find something like, okay, you're nice, we'll be friends, but like it's not going to go super deep.
Our background's very similar to yours, Vanessa. Do good in school, work very hard, get the job, do well. In my corporate life and my stint at my last company, I would reach these plateaus. And that's when I'd get antsy because I'd realize I'm not learning anything. I have to be learning something. If I'm not learning something, if I'm not growing, I need to switch jobs. I need to leave the company. I need to do something different. And I would always know when that was happening. And then an opportunity would present itself and I'd be able to switch jobs, leave the company, do the podcast, start my business, whatever it is. So that has been a drumbeat for me that I became aware of without anyone telling me. And I find that even in like I'm messaging with guys on these dating apps and I ask them a question and they're just like, oh, I haven't really thought about that. I'm like, you haven't? I had an issue in my last, relationship. Okay, great. Tell me about it. What did you learn? And then if they can't even really articulate it, I'm like, well, then you didn't understand the lesson. You didn't actually work on it. And that's really important. And being able to be in a relationship with, whether that's friend, family, partner, if it's a meaningful relationship, I can't be the only one being introspective and thinking about things. And I'm not trying to coach you because you're supposed to be my boyfriend. I want you to be able to put some of these pieces together and I can support you. So if people don't have that hard wiring or they weren't taught to do that, because we don't know, we all had different lives, backgrounds that we came from, and yet we learned these skills.
I wasn't taught how to learn a lesson from a hard situation. Self-taught that. I would also say, I think people that work with me, we have soul contracts at this point because I kind of get a glimmer, or it seems like synchronicities bring us together, or there'll kind of be a moment where we're like, hey, this feels like something.
What do you think is the coolest, most interesting, fulfilling part of doing intuitive work?
How much you can help people feel seen. People come to a reading, they're holding so much. We can see into more than what you're willing to talk about, or like you may not have the words for. I recently had a reading that was so amazing. The woman I read for was just the sweetest person you could imagine. And she asked me if her grandma was okay. Her grandma had passed. I was like, so I'm seeing your grandma like at a casino. Like she is having the time of her life. She's winning the slots. She has her visor on, her sunglasses. She has all these friends around her and she's like partying. And I know nothing about this woman's grandma. And I was like, does this sound good? She's like, oh my God, I can't believe you said that. She loved Vegas. And I was like, you can rest assured grandma is happy and heaven to her is Vegas. And things like that are just so rewarding to be able to put someone's mind at ease.
I think one of the things that we learn and we get better at is not prefacing or diminishing what we're about to say as much, because it's not us. It's something we're receiving. And sometimes the exact wording that we use or image that's coming through is pretty clear and they're going to get it. And sometimes it requires you playing with it, layering on interpretation as if it's a psychic dictionary. I can give an example. I commonly see images of buckles. That could signal, oh, something's about to start. You're gearing up for takeoff or for launch. You start to accumulate different images over time, and then you can interact with them for interpretation. And then it can land and resonate with somebody. But sometimes you just say something. I was doing a reading for someone, and we were talking about his career. And I just said what I thought was anecdotally. So let's say that you've been working at this company for 4 months, and he got all wide-eyed. He's like, no, I've been working there exactly 4 months. Sometimes it's even that minor. The more you practice, the more you can trust it, and recognizing that you are the messenger, you are the channel, the medium, the translator. It's okay if you don't know what you're talking about, because it's supposed to make sense to them.
If you're listening to these examples and you're curious to try out a reading with one of us, you know where to find the links. They're in the show notes, and we would be happy to see you at any time.
I do a lot of energy work in the womb space, clearing out things, doing things with the mother line, understanding the magic of the menstrual cycle. The womb is a portal to the divine. Let's just drop that bomb in the middle of it.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk more about that, because I know you discuss menstruation and the womb in tandem with the divine feminine work a lot on your podcast. In our food episode 5 of this season, Christine was teaching how you can consider what's happening with your cycle as intersecting with your diet and the types of foods that you're eating. How would you recommend that people could use or think about their cycle as relates to intuition?
So first I want to make sure that people have the language around their cycle. There's a handout for y'all. The first phase of your cycle is called the follicular, and that's after you menstruate. When the eggs are getting ready, and actually several eggs get bigger in your ovaries, and that's when your energy is rising, and that is related to the energy of spring. And it's also related to the energy of right after the new moon, where light is beginning to appear on the face of the moon, so like the crescent moon. This energy is preparation. You can use your intuition during this time to like lean into how you need to prepare projects at work, how you need to prepare your calendar, how you need to prepare for whatever season you're in. If you are the person in charge of getting things ready for the month in your house, don't do it on the first of the month. Do it after your period's done for that next month. Everyone tries to do it by the calendar, but the calendar is just made up days that have nothing to do with the seasons, that have nothing to do with how our body and nature actually works.
We talked about the Gregorian calendar in our bonus episode where we were doing 2025 forecasts, and how the New Year's that we have isn't necessarily the best time to set intentions. And so then your resolutions don't go through because it's not with the energetics. What if somebody is on birth control? Does that in any way take away from what you were talking about of working with nature, starting your cycle of your planning after your period ends?
Yes, because your eggs aren't getting ready because you're not ovulating. If you're on hormonal birth control of any type, the hormones that help prepare the eggs to get ready aren't happening. So the cycle that I'm about to describe to you, you will not experience. Men experience kind of like a flat line of hormones, but you'll experience more of a homeostasis experience on birth control. There's reasons people are on birth control. Not all of them are to prevent pregnancy, but often that is the reason. Preventing pregnancy is usually a pretty big fucking deal. So that's very important to time that when it is right in your life. I would not say I'm an expert on how birth control affects everything, other than just literally the piece I just said. There are other people that know a lot more about how it affects the body than me. The book that I read was called Sweetening the Pill, and it was how the pill affects the body, which was really good.
If you're on hormonal birth control, you will not experience ovulation. But if you're on non-hormonal birth control, like a copper IUD, you will experience ovulation.
Thank you for that clarification.
No problem. Just in case someone's listening and they're like, I have a copper IUD, this does not apply to you.
Yes, correct. So the next phase of the cycle is ovulation, and this is correlated with the energy of summer and the energy of the full moon. So it's really high energy, it's excitement, it's very go out and socialize. And so the intuition of this one is going to be more about how you connect to people and how you talk to people. There's a lot more sensual energy engaged with summer and ovulation and the full moon. The body is primed to engage with potential pregnancy during ovulation because that's what the biology wants to do. You're going to be more naturally radiant at this time. People are going to be more drawn to you. There's actually sciencey reasons your brain works differently at this time where you have access to more language.
Do you feel like that would be helpful with working with our guides or receiving messages? Because if we have our
that'd be
languages
intriguing.
improved in some capacity, then we could be better translators of the insights coming in.
I think that would be really important for a person who struggles to receive language. I wouldn't have thought of that.
Right. For people, what we're talking about, claircognizance, or if it was clairaudience, if you were hearing the language.
I think that's true. So the next phase is the luteal phase, which is actually a couple weeks long. The energy of fall, of wrapping things up, harvesting, slowing down, preparing for winter. The first week of luteal, you might still have higher energy. The second week of luteal is when you would experience your PMS symptoms if you have them. You are going to be really, really connected to your intuition. And if you experience negative thoughts, this is actually your intuition talking to you. This is when you are being told or reminded of the things that fucking piss you off that you have been ignoring the other 3 weeks of your life. These are the things that you have been shoving so far down inside of you that you cannot ignore anymore. And this is how women have been told, and everyone has been told, this is the time we just ignore her because she's gone fucking nuts. But it's actually the things that she most needs.
If I could interject for a second.
Oh, please.
Even while I was on birth control, during my luteal phase, whatever issue was coming up that wasn't getting addressed, it would come up over and over and louder until I addressed it. This is coming up while I have hormonal birth control masking my cycle. What's actually coming up? What's deep down inside of this? Can I change the situation? Do I have to end the situation? Our menstrual cycle is like our sixth vital sign. And even if you're on hormonal birth control, I think it still pokes through. It's telling you something. And even if you don't feel like you're an intuitive person or you don't have intuition, I guarantee every woman listening to this knows exactly what we're talking about and can now pinpoint it during their cycle when this is going to happen. And I really encourage you out there to track what messages are coming up for you, basically.
As listeners know, and Christine knows, I have a lot of trackers. And I have been tracking my period in relation to my mood, in relation to what the moon sign is, in relation to what the moon phase is this year. So I'll have a full year's worth of data to look back at. But I haven't looked at intuition layering on top of it. So I am curious if either of you happen to have any examples that you can think of from this phase where you had an insight. People who do not ovulate, who have no idea what we're talking about. I want to make sure that they can feel included in how this may present for people.
I know a person who was journaling and she noticed that in the journal, she was having really dark thoughts and went back and realized that it was during this part of her cycle and was like, oh, I need to take care of this. And this is not a person who is super connected to tracking her cycle. And actually, me having the conversation about cycles with her, this was her example to me that she believed what I was talking about.
Before I went on my spiritual journey and before I came off birth control, it was my therapist who noticed the pattern. I would have panic attacks every third week. It would either be about something I needed to address at work, something I needed to address in my relationship, something I needed to address with family.
That is very, very interesting. So, I mean, we only have a sample size of 2 here. Maybe we should give the caveat to the listener that it doesn't necessarily mean when you're in this phase that what is coming through and presenting is dark or negative or some sort of full body charged experience.
There is a lot of pain related to being a woman in the history of humanity that is unfinished and unhealed. And it is resting in the bodies of women who are alive on Earth right now. Currently, we are rising into the ability to heal it. When our bodies want to get our attention, they send us signals. My shoulder hurts. Please pay attention to me. I want you to have a conversation with me as a shoulder. Give me something that I need. But then you don't, because you don't know how to talk to your body because you're divorced from your body. And so then the pain in your shoulder gets louder and louder. And then you do something simple and you injure your shoulder. Guess what? Same for your hoo-ha. If you're not listening to your womb space because you don't know how, and it's not your fault because no one taught you, because lots and lots of women are separated from that space because society said so. Take the medication and hide your pads and all those messages that we were all taught from mom and grandma and auntie and siblings, male teachers who, when you ask to go change your pad, tell you you're gross or whatever the story is. And then you feel shame and internalize it and think it's your fault. All the stories, separating from your own womb space so you don't listen to it and you try and suppress it because you're going to be an A+ professional woman with whatever your degree says to do. If our bodies speak to us and they get louder and louder and louder and louder and louder, if you're experiencing PMS symptoms and menstrual pain, your womb is trying to say things to you. It could be ancestral or global. Imagine in however many years, I don't know if that's 5 years if we're super fucking amazing, or 1,000 years that it takes us to cleanse the global history of the awful things that have happened to women in the history of the earth. We clear all of them. What will women be experiencing during what used to be PMS? What will they be experiencing during that week when their intuition is heightened and their body no longer has to tell them, heal my pain? What will we be fucking downloading when we don't have to do that anymore? I didn't even know I was going to say that.
As you can already tell, listener, this conversation with Vanessa has some truly mind-blowing gems in it.
I'm still reeling from that last question she had about how our channeled insights could be completely reoriented around new topics we can't even fathom in the present moment once we make more meaningful progress as a society and shed all of its isms.
I completely agree. And I also think this is the perfect stopping point for our two-parter. Why don't we leave the listener with this big picture question to chew on and share the rest of the interview next week?
Sounds like a plan.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to learn more, the resources we used to prepare for this episode are listed in the show notes.
If you're curious to develop your intuition, we've partnered with the Nirvana Be Light program to give our listeners a $500 discount on tuition fees. Email us for more details and we'll connect you with the founder, Deganit Noor.
Want to connect with us? You can reach me, Christine, at Channeled by Christine with 1 L on Instagram.
And you can reach me, Renee, at _read by Renee, or connect with us both via email at synergytosynastry@gmail.com.
Keep your spirit curious and your aura sparkling.
We'll see you when the stars next align.
There's like way more detail. Way more to the story than you think.
What is that noise?
There's like a steamboat outside. Sorry.